Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'm going to be going over my usual take on Prime Minister's questions, despite the huge circus going on around Boris Johnson's hearing, and talk of a Tory rebellion over Sunak's Windsor framework later on, although I don't think anything really come of it. Today, with another report into corruption at the Met Police being published, Keir Starmer decided to focus on the Tories' record on policing and crime. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I was basically relying on Starmer and Sunak putting on a good show here. There are two main reasons not to abandon my look at PMQs. First, doesn't actually feel right to push out the actual head of government being scrutinised for the sake of the sensationalism of the former head of government blustering his way through an investigation into his conduct. But second, even as this video is being published, never mind being recorded, Boris Johnson is still brain farting his way through his hearing. So that report needs to wait till tomorrow, come what may. But the topic of discussion, from Starmer at least today, was the fallout from the latest inquiry to label the Met Police as institutionally racist. Inquiries have been doing this for over 2 decades now, yet the situation only seems to get worse. This latest Casey report also labels the Met as institutionally bigoted in regards to pretty much every prejudice you can think of. And although we've had clear enough proof of the failures of the Met Police for decades now, some of the incidents that I've read within this report still shocked me. I think it's impossible to read this report and think, when you consider the reports of the past as well, to think that the Met can really be saved. It just gets worse. There are people talking seriously about whether we need to just abolish the Met altogether. There have been people for years, but I think it's just going to grow to a crescendo. You know, by that they don't mean abolish police in London. They mean have a London police force, that one that works in basically the same way as other forces, and have the other departments made into separate units. There has to come a time when a government decides enough is enough. But to listen to Sunak's responses to Starmer's questions, you get the impression it's not going to be his government that does so. I also have to say there was a quite stunning level of noise coming from the Tory benches on this one. Oh, they interrupted proceedings quite a lot of times. The Tories often have to concede that the public think Labour are better at managing healthcare and education, but the Conservatives are better on law and order and defence. That's the way the public often look at it. But just because they have a generally authoritarian outlook doesn't mean they manage these things well. The Tories have a shocking record. But they've got another problem at the moment as well, and this may explain why the noise levels, why they wanted to drown Starmer out. See, their record on crime and policing is poor. But they can just lie about it. In fact, Sunak, and I'll discuss this as well as we go through the video, did lie about it today. But with Starmer, they've got another problem. He's a former top prosecutor. Labour are now led by someone who was putting the most dangerous criminals in the country behind bars. Quite difficult for the Tories to say Labour are soft on crime. Doesn't stop them trying, but quite difficult when they're led by such a person. You know, this is basically Starmer's area, and no Tory leader is going to be able to match him on this platform. I saw someone saying today that Starmer should use it more often. Perhaps he should. After paying tribute to PC Palmer, the police officer who gave his life in defence of Parliament 6 years ago today, something all party leaders did, by the way, Starmer began by saying that he accepts the Louise Casey recommendations for the Met Police in full. He asked if Sunak does so as well. Sunak didn't answer that question. He said he was appalled to read the report and that the government is taking steps to improve things, but he didn't say he accepted all the recommendations, to which Starmer then responded saying he'll take it that Sunak accepts the report in full, but I think I'd have wanted to press him on the recommendations. I think it would be worth it. See, it's too easy. I've seen it too many times. Governments get a report and a damning report, something that really paints a very grim picture of some institution in the country. And this is terrible. Have you read this? This is absolutely awful. I was shocked, I tell you. And then they don't implement the recommendations in the report. They always say, we're going to fix it in our own way. But it never gets fixed. And usually about 10 years later, another report says that the problems are still there, maybe even worse. But that is of no consequence to the government of the time because they've moved on. It's a different government now in place. They get the new report and go, oh my goodness, this is appalling. Something must be done. Rinse and repeat ad infinitum. But anyway, Starmer then detailed Labour's plans for national vetting of police officers. Sunak said, there's no need for this because we've got our own plans. We already started our own plans. We're ahead of you, Starmer, me old China. He didn't actually say those words. The thing is, he doesn't have those plans, though. His plan is to keep the Met using a completely different system to other police forces. You know, I've sometimes talked in the past about how, you know, when there's another story about the terrible corruption within the Met Police, and people sort of think, oh, the police in the UK is really... It's not true of other police forces. The Met Police... a very different beast to other police forces around the country who are much more professional. The Met Police have a very different structure, very different types of political interference in them. This is why some argue that it should just be dissolved and replaced with a more normal police force. Starmer hit back by saying that the plans Sunak is talking about wouldn't be mandatory for police forces. He asked how it can be right that you have different standards for different police forces. And this gets to the nub of it. You know, when Labour is saying, look, we want a system of robust vetting for all police officers, and Sunak says, oh no, we're already doing our own thing, but it's not mandatory, it's worthless. Worthless. Starmer then moved on to the failure to tackle serious sexual assault. He said the rape charge rate stands at 1.6%. He said that he favours dedicated rape units in every police force. Why won't the Tories back that? Sunak then boasted about neighbourhood crime being down 29% since 2019. Now, I will just point out, first of all, you don't try and defend the record on rape by talking about neighbourhood crime. But second of all, neighbourhood crime down 29% since 2019, you say? So that means you're basically choosing a baseline, right? Because what's 2019 got to do with you, Sunak, mate? You know, the Tories came to power in 2010. You came to power last year. What's 2019 got to do with it? Is it because if you use 2019 as your baseline, you get to include the figures from 2020, where the country was in lockdown for quite a lot of the time, everyone was at home, and therefore, of course, there were much lower levels of crime, particularly neighbourhood crime, because everyone was at home. Burglars weren't allowed to wander the streets, and if they did, you're not much chance of finding an empty house during the day or the night, are you? Beware the fiddle. Beware these statistical fiddles. Sunak also said that the government is on target for doubling the number of rape cases reaching court. Now, here's another statistical fiddle. See, when you say you're going to double the charge rate for something, sounds impressive, doesn't it? I would even if I was given that statement out of context, I'd immediately say, that suggests to me the rate is quite low. But we know it is because Starmer's just said what it is, 1.6%. What Sunak is actually doing, right, is boasting that that he thinks the charge rate for rapes might reach 3%, and that would be a great success. Do you consider a 3% charge rate for rape cases being a great success? I don't. But this is another con. Talking about increasing a rate of something by a certain proportion. Doubling a negligibly small rate is not something to be proud of. Starmer then suggested that Sunak needs to get out of Westminster and Kensington and not just go to Malibu, but around the streets of Britain. Although it took him quite a long time to make this statement because it was interrupted multiple times by the Speaker trying to keep the Tories quiet. They went absolutely ballistic. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. Some people give Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, crap about things he can do nothing about. Oh, why did you do this? He can't. But I'll tell you what he can do. He can keep order. He's absolutely useless at that. Absolutely, he deserves every bit of criticism for that. Multiple times he named the same MPs that were disrupting proceedings. He should have called out a few by name and said, if you do it again, you're out. And then when they do it again, kick them out. And he didn't. He kept talking about them having to buy tea or something. They don't care about that. It's subsidised anyway. So they kept interrupting and the Speaker kept going, oh no, could you stop it? Oh no, that's the last time. No, it's not the last time until you kick them out. Bloody useless. But anyway, never mind. Starmer then brought up the village I grew up in, Armthorpe in Doncaster. Not in good terms. He talked about one cul-de-sac seeing 10 burglaries in 18 months and only one of them resulting in a charge. Sunak tried to come back to Starmer's quip about getting out and about by saying, oh, North Yorkshire's a lot further away than North London, comparing his constituency with Starmer's. But the thing is, Starmer has actually gone around the country, though. He's even done interviews with local journalists. Sunak hasn't. Sunak's hidden away. But Sunak then claimed that crime has come down since the Tories came to power, and he said it's a result of hiring 20,000 new police officers. Needless to say, this is a lie on all counts. The Tories reduced the number of police officers by 21,000, then only very recently promised to recruit 20,000 more. So even if they did that, they've taken away 21,000 experienced officers and replaced them with 20,000 inexperienced officers. However, that's still down on numbers, by the way. However, they haven't recruited 20,000 officers. They just say they have plans to. They've not got anywhere near this 20,000 new officers. The other thing to point out is his assertion that crime rate being down is misleading. See, overall, if you look at the overall crime rate for the UK since 2010, it does appear to be down. But there's a couple of things to say about this. First of all, the overall level of crime being down is down to massive reductions in crime levels in Scotland and Northern Ireland, where policing is devolved. The crime rate for England and Wales, for which the Home Office have responsibility, is up. Now, you may think to yourself, well, Wales is devolved, Phil. There's a reason why on this chart, England and Wales are put together. Policing is not devolved in Wales as fully as it is in Scotland. So the Home Office still basically presides over it. So where the Tories have direct control over policing is England and Wales. And you can see here, the crime rate has gone up. The other thing to note is that overall crime rate hides a multitude of sins. Some crimes are more serious than others. And it's the more serious crimes like sexual assault which are on the increase as a result of that very low charge rate. So more fiddling with statistics as well as just blatant lies from the Tory Prime Minister there. He tried to say Labour were soft on crime, soft on criminals. But like I said earlier, they're going to struggle with this one, given who the Labour leader is. Starmer then flexed his experience of the criminal justice system by talking about all the very serious criminals that he'd put behind bars. But he also said that the only criminal investigation Sunak's ever been involved in is the one that found him guilty of breaking the law. He says it's all very well talking about tough sentences, but you've got to catch them first. He said burglars and rapists walk the streets with impunity. I mean, they walk the corridors of the Met Police with impunity. We read this report. But Sunak then ended up by trying to make a feeble defence of his partygate fine before local Tory MP asked a question about steel. But then it was Stephen Flynn for the SNP. He wanted to discuss Brexit as a stick to beat both the Tories and Labour with. Now, I think this is going to be quite important for him. I think Stephen Flynn is going to have to do some fairly heavy lifting to make up for his colleagues in Holyrood. I think he's going to need to step up the attacks on Labour much more urgently than the Tories in the coming months because the SNP risk losing ground to them post-Sturgeon. But he began by asking Sunak what concerned him most about Brexit. Was it the 4% hit to productivity, or was it the fact that 3 former Tory leaders were voting against him later today? At which point, actually, the Speaker tried to correct him, saying it was 2, but it wasn't 2, it's 3, because Ian Duncan Smith is also threatening to vote against it. But anyway, never mind that. Sunak defended his Windsor framework and quoted the words of a senior member of the SNP describing the party as being in a mess. A little bit feeble, but never mind. Flynn then reeled off a list of ways in which we are doing very badly out of Brexit, including the biggest drop in living standards on record, the highest rate of tax since just after the Second World War, and the high inflation. And I'll tell you what I found odd. He quoted the inflation figure. Was it 10.4%, I think? And I thought to myself, would he have maybe done better to point out that this is an increase on the start of the year? See, Sunak's boasting about how he's going to halve inflation. Now, in reality, if inflation halves, and it's certainly forecast to halve, it'd be nothing to do with him. In fact, I think it's expected to more than halve. But if it halves or whatever, it's because the pressures that caused it to rise last year are declining. But inflation is actually rising at the moment. There's a risk it might not halve at all. I mean, all sorts of things can happen. We're actually in the middle of a banking crisis. Although, you know, as far as I can tell, people are reasonably confident it'll be contained. What if it's not? Shouldn't Flynn be expressing doubts about a government that claims to have a plan to halve inflation when the current figure is actually going up? But anyway, he then said, when will the Tories and indeed Labour accept that Brexit can't work? At which point Sunak just said that the government were paying half of the people's energy bills. No, they're not. They've allowed them to double and then use as much of our money again to maintain excess profits for oil companies. Obviously, Flynn wasn't allowed to come back on that one. He didn't look impressed, I have to say, with the responses he got, but I think he probably made his points. But that was PMQs. I'm going to finish off here because the gobshite is about to speak. I'm going to get myself ready to listen to 4 hours of Boris Johnson talking shit. Wish me luck. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.